Welcome to episode 94 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm speaking with Leonard Cochran, a man who found new purpose in his later years by leading a women's restoration home and launching a business dedicated to relational leadership. Leonard shares his journey of directing Leah's House, a 12-month residential program in Mississippi for women overcoming addiction and trauma. He explains how his work there intersects with his passion for leadership training. He also introduces his business, UpWords Unlimited, as well as his new book on relational leadership. Both offer valuable insights on mentorship, community, and the importance of connection. To find out what prompted him to embrace relational leadership and to help women to overcome trauma or addiction, please welcome Leonard Cochran to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Leonard. I really appreciate the time. You had an interesting quote on your Facebook profile recently that I really enjoyed. Our hope is not in the new year, but the one who makes all things new. I love that perspective, and it's a great way to start 2025.
Thanks for having me on. It's good to know you're following social media.
Sure. So how long have you been involved with Leah's House, and what is Leah's House?
My wife and I began with Leah's House. At this point, we've been running the home for 3 years, and I'll explain what it is in just a second. We sat on the board 2 years prior, so it's been about 5 years of involvement with it. And what Leah's House is, it's a 12-month women's restoration program. Rather than call it a rehab or anything like that, we call it a restoration home. And so they live in a residence. My wife and I rent the home, or the nonprofit rents the home, and we can house women there and to help them recover. Everyone that has come through there has got some kind of trauma. And when I say trauma, traumatic trauma. Some are recovering from addiction, a lot are. But we're there to help them recover from the past and help them, give them the tools so they can propel forward. And my wife does the day-to-day operations of it. I have the fancy title of executive director, which means I dabble in there and give advice all the time.
And you're the keeper of the checkbook, I'm sure.
The keeper of the checkbook as well, yes.
So you only work with women, not generally girls and teenagers?
Yes, just with women. The genesis of how we got started with that is around about 8 years ago now, my wife volunteered for a recovery home. And it was the first time in our married life, and we're currently at 35. So it was my first time in our married life where I saw my wife come home and she was just glowing. And she had found her calling, so to speak, and just really loved it. And she volunteered at a few different local homes. And really, honestly, shortly after she started, she said, I think that's what I want to do.
Okay.
And so we began to pray about the idea of opening a home. And needless to say, both she and I were somewhat looking towards slowing down as we got older. And so it's a big decision. What are the legal requirements? How much of the time, talent, and treasure investment is this going to be, right? And so when Leah's House came along, it was already in existence for about 8 years prior to us setting on the board. And we served a couple of years there. And then the founder decided she wanted to do some outreach and some activities with the prisoners. And she wanted to resign. And she was either going to dissolve Leah's House or hand it over to us. And needless to say, that's what happened as we took it over. And right at 3 years now.
When you said prisoners, these are women who have been primarily incarcerated in the past and are coming back into...
So some of the women that do come through Leah's House do come from prisons. And so she just really, the founder had a real heart to make that shift. No fault on anybody for that, because rather than a 24/7, you can go visit and go back home. And sometimes the house is a 24/7 business for us. We do have a gal that stays there. She graduated the program, and she is the house mom, or the resident director as the more professional term. But she lives there to take care of the evenings and the nighttime. And then my wife is there each day throughout the week. to be with the women. So we try and not have too much downtime for them as much as we can.
So this is a residential facility. They're there
It
for
is
12
Mhm.
months.
For 12 months, yes.
That's a long commitment to make, but I would imagine you have that pretty good success when you get to know the women that well.
Yeah. Yeah. And in 12 months too, especially if there's addiction involved, but it's not even just addiction, but that's a short runway to get people back upon their feet. So we do require, if there's addiction involved, they do have to be detoxed before they come in. I'm the nerd side of it, so you'll hear that come out. But we know scientifically it can take 6 months to a year, depending what drug's been used and how long it's been used, to get that cloud out of their mind. And so with us at Leah's house, what we'll do, the first month, my wife is pretty easy. My wife goes pretty easy with them and doesn't bombard them with too much. We've got some foundational curricula that all the women go through. And then as they progress and as they're doing well, around about 6 months or so, then they can begin to look for work and have a job, which of course with the job comes a cell phone. They don't have a cell phone up to that point. They've got access to use a phone, but they don't have their own. But they'll work, have a cell phone, and then we start worrying about teaching them how to do finances and so on. So it's a pretty quick runway, honestly.
It sounds like a great way to transition from an incarcerated experience into a life of independence, totally. Guiding people through that gently rather than releasing them onto the streets and saying, okay, you're on your own. I would imagine you don't have a lot of recidivism at that point.
Yeah, we're still new at it ourselves. And in the 3 years we've been there, we've had 3 women complete the program all the way for 12
Okay.
months. Needless to say, some come for 2, 3 months, 4 months, 10 months. Some, they choose to leave. They're not there. So far, we've not had anybody specifically court ordered to be there. One of them is somewhat ordered, but that's a long story. We won't get into.
Right.
Anyhow, typically they're not court ordered to be there. And so should they choose to leave, they're really free to leave.
Okay.
If someone's not wanting help, we can't help them.
Sure.
It's
Or along the same line, if they really embrace the program and they want to change life and they get forward, they get the help that they need and they feel comfortable enough that they can go out on their own, they're able to
Yes.
do that.
Yes.
How many
absolutely.
women live in the home at any given time?
Yeah, it is a residential, literal home that we're renting. And with the lease agreement we have, it's a 3-bedroom home. And so we have 4 women there, as well as in the 3rd bedroom is where the resident manager stays. So we just house 4 plus the one, so 5 women.
So they get to really know each other intimately. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's the goal, is to have it very much like a family environment. Right. Most Americans probably come from dysfunction in some form or another, but my wife really does try and make sure it's not institutionalized at all. It's fully decorated. A normal house would be decorated. We're fortunate to have a large area in the back where they can have a classroom, and it's got very large bookshelves of helpful books. They do the crafts back there. We have some women that volunteer and come in and do crafts weekly, and we're biblically based in the way we do it. And so they oftentimes tie in biblical messages with that. But yeah, it's a very home-like atmosphere deliberately.
That's neat. What's the significance of the Leah name?
So Leah, in scripture, Jacob was pursuing a wife, and he saw Rachel and was impressed with her looks. And so he worked 7 years to get Rachel, but he was given Leah instead. And so Leah is a downcast one because he didn't want her. She was unwanted. And so eventually, though, Leah's the one that had children. And we see later in scriptures, it was eventually through Leah that actually Christ himself was born. And so that's a story of redemption. So these women, very much from the past that they have, oftentimes are unwanted, have been abused, neglected, or whatnot. And we like to see that redemption story in the end, where they can grow out of their circumstances and grow not only in their relationship with God, but like we talked about, just being able to sustain work and other things as well.
As the executive director of Leah's House, what is it that you do specifically to help the organization?
Anything?
Anything?
Well, one thing that I did have somebody ask a similar question recently, and one thing that I've embraced, and it took me a while to realize, unfortunately, most of the women don't have good past track record with the men in their life, or maybe I should say the men have not been good track record, however you want to word that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to be maybe one of the first males that they can trust. And that's not tooting my own horn, but it's a situation where I have to be very cautious in my approach and what I do. My wife is real good to give me counsel on that. But yeah, so trying to be a positive role model. And I think that's a message that I'm going to continue to carry. So far, I've not had opportunity to share that, Greg, but just for us as men to recognize the fragility of women and what role we can play in damaging that and what role we can play in helping that, regardless of the relationship we have with them.
That's a very good position to take. I know that a lot of women have suffered at the hands of men over the years. For you to be able to step in and show them that there are men who care in a loving and supportive role, I think that's a great experience.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm trying to do.
Leah's House is something you do with your wife, but then you have another business that you do on your own.
Yeah, so that's the nonprofit sector. And the for-profit sector is I have an LLC that's called UpWords Unlimited, and that's UpWords, WORDS, spelled words because words matter, UpWords Unlimited. And it started out as a side business that I had. So I worked for a very large hotel company. If you find me on LinkedIn, you'll know real quick who that is. You'll recognize the name. And I'm not ashamed to say it. They've been good to me. But I worked for Hilton Hotels, and I was in learning development there for 18 years out of my tenure of 20-some years there. It was a side project that I started while I was working with Hilton, but I felt it conflicted with my job. It just sat fairly dormant until COVID. And during COVID, because of the layoffs, or the furlough, I should say, because of furlough, we were allowed to find income another way before we returned back to work. And so that's when UpWords really began to kick off. And now that I've left Hilton and began to focus more on our nonprofit, that's when I've been working on UpWords Unlimited. I've published a book, and I've gotten real focused as far as what the company now is and the direction that I want to take the company. And so that's what I've been working on here recently.
What is it that UpWords does?
I can't give a short answer, Greg. Fumbled across a term called relational leadership. Very intrigued with it. So I Googled it. And at the time, I was only able to find 3 different resources. I found a college textbook that had the term in there. I found a Christian book that somebody had written using it and explaining it from a biblical perspective. And then I found a workshop where it was one of the sessions. And so I bought both books and went to the workshop and decided that I want to own that term. And UpWords Unlimited, I will be focusing and am focused on all things relational leadership. And in my book, I break down where there's 4 different areas that we focus on as far as in the work world, and we can apply those same principles outside the work world. But I have 4 principles there. And then I'm also working on the next book that has 4 more principles. In all, there's 8 areas that I focus on. So just, for example, one of them is people. That's a broad topic, right? So how do you care for team members? How do you care for people? How do you communicate? The relation skills, all kinds of things can fall within that bucket of people. But those are the types of things that I do training with, those different areas.
Okay. Sounds like something that we definitely need. We have enough bosses. What we need are some real leaders. And by relational leadership, are you talking about getting to know the people that they're working with as people, not just workers?
Yes, absolutely. So there's currently a trend where we hear a lot, especially if you're in the human resources sector, in the HR sector, you hear that I'm the chief people person or the chief whatever and all that. We say all of that, but in the end, it's those individual bosses, those individual leaders that have the biggest impact on their team members. And we know statistically that's how it works, right? That you hire on for what the company is and what they represent, but then you either stay on the job or leave the job because of your immediate manager. And then especially right now, for example, the reason I'm convinced that relational leadership is so critical, in fact, I even use the tagline on my social media, you might see it on my banner on my page, It's leadership for the 21st century. Leonard, we're 25 years in. We are 25 years in. However, we're still leading like my father and my grandfather's generation. By and large, we've not changed much in the way we lead people. And a key element of that is relationship. And when you look at the fact right now, we have 60 million Gen Zers in the workforce. Now, Gen Z is roughly age 17 to 25, 26, somewhere in there. So we have 60 million. So that's the biggest bubble since the baby boomers. However, that's also the bubble that was born with social media. They've been on keyboards or screens their entire life, and they've had more social media than the rest of us, especially your audience is 50 and older. A lot of us, like myself, didn't have that until we were well into adulthood. With that comes the opportunity to help them have some of the skills that you and I were forced to learn in the environment that you and I were raised in. Our parents' tolerance level was different than what it is now. And some of the behaviors and things that we see in the younger workers, we don't understand oftentimes as senior folks. And by senior, I just mean advanced in the workplace. And so we now have a real opportunity to nurture, lead, and guide the younger generation. And I'm convinced that's only going to happen with relationship. We like to think that social media gives us relationship. And the quote that I have that I saw a meme of that I just thought was beautiful is, I'm old enough now that I would rather, as far as relationships, I would rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. And unfortunately, I believe the younger generation is focused on gathering pennies instead of having depth. And we need depth. And we, as mature folks, have the opportunity. We can be that adult and we can help with that depth and help grow them. And then our women's home that we just talked about, Leah's house, we can help change that trajectory of somebody's life. And that's the vision that I have with that.
I love it. There was a movie out recently called The Forge. Did you happen to see that? It really embraces the idea of relational leadership.
Yes. In fact, I did not see it initially. My wife took the women's from Leah's house, oddly enough. They went and saw it, and I thought, you guys go have fun. It's sometimes good to get away from women and be alone, do whatever. And they went, my wife called me up afterwards and said, you have got to see this. This is what you're trying to do. And I went and saw it and cried through significant portions of the movie because it does embody a lot of what UpWords Unlimited is trying to accomplish.
That's neat because that kind of mentorship can change lives and the trajectory that impacts people for generations following that.
Absolutely.
The cornerstone of UpWords Unlimited appears to be, at this point, conversations, connections, collaboration, and community. Why are all 4 of those necessary?
You're absolutely right. That is the cornerstone. And that's book 2 that's not been written, but I'll gladly share here. Okay. Everything starts with a conversation. In fact, you and I met, it was virtual, but we did have a brief conversation and connected on social media after. And then upon doing that, we moved from that conversation and we found out we had some common ground. So from there, we had a connection. And so we've shared offline, we've shared a few things with each other and recognized that you and I have some similar things. And so that's caused a connection. Then the next step, here we are collaborating on a podcast. Now it's your podcast, so I'm not doing much to collaborate other than talking. But nonetheless, we're collaborating. And then what can happen if our relationship continues and we continue to build on those first 3 C's, conversation, connection, and collaboration, I believe that the intersection of those 3 is where we find real community. And so community is formed by those 3 items at that intersection. And so unlike culture that we talk about so often in the corporate world, we can have culture and it's good culture, but I don't necessarily have to participate. But when we say community, it's more implicit that I'm a participant. I'm active in it and playing a part in it. So it's a reciprocal relationship that forms community. And so I believe that's the real key and the underbelly of what makes businesses successful as well as in any other organization successful.
I love it. The social media, we talked about that in the past, has changed the way we relate to people in many ways. It's very superficial. And we need to get back to genuine relationships in order to be successful. I think
Yeah.
we've had this proliferation of spammers on platforms like LinkedIn who connect with people, but they bring in a connection and immediately start selling them without trying to get to know who they are, what they believe in, how they can actually work together to collaborate. It's all about sales and not about relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody is selling something. And so we have an opportunity to just present who we are and be. The word authenticity is a big word right now. But I think it's even getting lost in the white noise of the internet of what it means to be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to use the word genuine. So we need to be genuine. And I know you and I have had some exchange with one another. And so I know you're genuine, you're sincere, you're not pitching anything to me, and I haven't pitched anything to you. But oddly enough, in doing that, you and I are more susceptible because we're building trust is what it is. So you and I are more susceptible that, hey, I wonder if Greg knows this. You know, you've mentioned your past of dealing with writing about RV parks and whatnot. So if I had a question about an RV park, you would come to mind as opposed to this guy that's pitching and selling online. I'd come to you as a trusted friend at that point.
What kinds of things do you do for people then with UpWords Unlimited?
Right now, pretty much touting the book as the doorway to enter. So doing presentations for that and doing talks for that. But certainly I can come, I've done some consulting as far as executive coaching with folks, and it's still in the early stages. But my hope is, of course, not only just to do speaking, but to be able to come to businesses, talk to them, train their teams. My real focus is training leaders. And so they can then take that message, modify it to fit their business. And of course, I'll customize it as best I can to speak the language and meet the needs of their business. But they, again, those frontline people are the ones that are critical for the success of all that.
Are you
Yeah.
more focused on developing mentorship relationships, that type of thing?
Not mentoring specific. I'm looking for the opportunity with that, but I have not gotten into that just yet. So far, I've just been dealing from a business perspective with folks. But to your point, definitely mentorship is needed, and it's finding that right opportunity for that as well.
How did you discover this while you were working for a major hotel chain?
The 4 C's is just something that came to me. I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it. When I started the business, UpWords, like I said, I chose the name because words are important. And I did not have a published book at the time, but I dabbled in writing poetry or writing things here and there, blogging, whatnot. And so I just, honestly, because of my faith and what I feel is important, I think we can lead people without explicitly proselytizing them. And so that's important to me is we can use good positive principles to guide people. And frankly, as a Christian, should they receive Christ, that's really what we want to see, but I don't push that. I would rather demonstrate the way to walk and have people choose to because of seeing that walk worked out.
Okay.
And so with my company, that's where the name comes from originally. And I used to have this big, long explanation on the website, but nobody wants to see that. But that's where that was.
And I like the idea that you're incorporating faith into the workplace because I've read a number of articles over the years that say the next revival is going to come out of the marketplace, not necessarily the church.
And I'm hearing and running into things like that as well, Greg. In fact, it's not a formal nonprofit or anything yet, but I'm in the early stages. I've got a small group that I work with on Friday mornings before work starts. We meet at 6:30 to 7:30 at a local coffee shop, and I call that group Market Ministers. And that's exactly what that is, because we, again, when you add this whole package together, relational leadership and all of these things, we have an opportunity to influence folks. Because more people are, as I say on my little Market Minister advertisement, more people are in work on any given day than on church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you and I are in the workplace, we have a real opportunity to influence, direct, and lead people the way they need to be led. And even if we just simply talk about having integrity, or we talk about honesty, or we talk about some of these other things, because ethics, we're having to teach ethics in school now,
Right.
in colleges. So if we could exemplify that as people of faith or as people that just like the Christian concepts, then we can have a major impact in our industries or in our businesses, and for those that work for us as well.
That's so true. The average person, if they go to church, will spend 2 hours a week there,
Yeah.
mingling with people, talking, learning, etc., serving. Then they'll go off to work and they'll be spending 40 to 60 hours a week with other people. And that's where real relationships take place, in those kind of environments with that kind of contact.
And in a work environment too, it's structured where you and I can converse. We can debate, we can have questions, we can get answers, have discussions. And most congregations are not quite set up that way. And so it's a real opportunity to dig deeper, to your point, and have that relationship. And then when I understand you better and understand your needs better, and you understand me and my needs better, then again, that's that whole collaboration. It leads to connection, collaboration, and community. So we can change that environment.
I agree. You took all of this knowledge and put it in a book that you released. Was it this year?
It was around early in 2024. I wrote a book called Relational Leadership and the Introduction. And what I did is that has 4 principles. And for the sake of our audience, I won't keep them in suspense. I'll tell those real quick. But what I did is I wrote it as a business narrative, which means, honestly, I borrowed from Ken Blanchard. For those that might recognize his name, in the 80s, he wrote a book, 1 Minute Manager. Most people are more familiar with Who Moved My Cheese. But 1 Minute Manager uses people instead of mice, so I like to reference that. And so I wrote a story that unfolds the 4 principles in the book to help. Number one, it's sticky, so it helps us to remember it better. And then through the ideation in the book, you can get your own ideas, because I'm just scratching the surface of these 4 principles. And these principles, again, came to me as I began to write the book. I had 3. And then I encountered a friend of mine and said, yeah, I've got 3, but I've already got 4 C's that I have over here, those that we just talked about. But I feel like I need a 4th one in the book. And we had some discussion, and then it hit me. So in the book, I talk about purpose. So everything starts with what our purpose is. And then to guide us to our purpose, we have to have principles. And those, in the business world, we hang those on the wall, and we have our mantras and all of that. So that's that. And then thirdly, we have people. And I've had pushback saying people needed to be first. People technically are first, but we can lead people. But if we don't know where we're going, we're not leading them very well. And so that's why the purpose and the principles are first, and then people. Most of the work is where the people are. And we could go on and on about how to lead and relationships and the importance of that, psychological safety, all those fun terms that we use in the learning world. And then lastly is profits. So as a business or as an institution, there's nothing wrong in having a profit, but what do we do with that profit? Is it a reasonable profit, or are we being excessive? And so that's that moral compass of what we do with the money when we get it.
I'm so glad to hear that somebody is embracing that, because the direction that American corporations have taken over the last 20 years has been profit. And it used to be that people ran businesses and they were super happy. They supported their employees, they supported their communities, and they brought home 5 to 10% profit every year. Now they're demanding 20% or more return every year. And that means cut services, cut those relationships. And I'd like to hear, I think your approach is more refreshing.
And my approach is a long-term game as well, Greg. So that sometimes is not appealing. In this day and age, my son has a Robinhood account, and I hear about it almost daily. When nothing wrong with Robinhood and trading stocks. It's just become affordable for everybody. Is why I mentioned Robinhood. My first time ever investing in the market, the threshold was, I found Ameritrade was $500, and I was excited. It was only $500. Now you can get in for just nothing.
Right.
But what that does, though, is those shareholders, those people are making an investment. They want a quick turn on their money. And it's just the psyche of which we have in our nation today. And unfortunately, if we run a business thinking only short term, then long term it's going to cost us.
And it
And
is.
so we have to have a long term look at things, whether we have shareholders or not. We need to educate folks to understand that when you do a business, it's long term, just the same whether it's farming or not. Because even a farmer, what I plant this year is going to affect what I can plant next year. I didn't say harvest. I said what I can plant again next year, because we know the soil, nutrients are pulled from the soil and so on. So in business, what we plant in our business this year affects what we can do next year as well. And so we've got to look at that long-term goal and we talk about sustainability so much, but we don't necessarily think of it from a financial and a business perspective. And I believe that's terribly important for us.
Is your book a fictional story that just tells a tale, or are you relaying business principles?
It is a fictional story that I
Okay.
share the principles in. And so I give examples of how these principles can be applied in the book. It's not exhaustive, but I do have those 4 key principles are there. And I submit ideas through the fictional story. I submit ideas and ways they could be done.
Okay. So you have fictional characters who are interacting with each other kind of thing and relaying these
Yes.
principles. Those are the best books to read.
Yeah, this particular book, the main character is Matt, and his father has died, and he's assumed his father's business happens to be a donut shop. And so one day he is just flustered, leaves work, and goes down the road and lands in a coffee shop. And there he meets his mentor. And she is a widow woman whose husband was a businessman, and she helped him in his business. And so she unfolds the principles of relational leadership, those 4 Ps. And he begins to integrate those in his work, and he sees the changes and the successes from implementing those. And they have this relationship there.
Imagine a woman leading a guy in relational issues.
Yeah, there you go. Right?
We could
Yeah,
benefit a lot from listening to the women about relational matters. That'd be good.
yeah,
What prompted
absolutely.
you to write the book?
Just, I felt the need to express those principles. I've always wanted to write a book. In fact, honestly, I've got an outline for a book that's 8 or 9 years old, and it's a very explicit outline. I could just sit down and write it tomorrow. But I just didn't feel it was, quote unquote, the book that I should write. And so when I started, again, researching what was out there for relational leadership and what exists today, I I believe this book encompasses what you can find in a college textbook about relational leadership, but it's worded and done in such a way that's a lot more understandable. And
Conversational.
mind you, it's not intended to be a deep dive by any stretch of the imagination either. It's about a 2.5 hour read, but it does plant those seeds and allow you to use your own imagination, your own creativity to figure out how could you implement this in your world and how you can see success in your world by using those principles.
Did you self-publish this, or did you go with a traditional publisher?
Yes, it is self-published on
Okay.
Amazon. So it is only available on Amazon. It's Kindle as well as in print. And then I did do an audio myself that is available. If you go to therlcoach.com, you can sign up there. I had this wonderful vision that I was going to send out a weekly email to folks and do all that. I am not sending out a weekly email, but you can get the audio for free there. And I promise you'll never be bothered by maybe 1 or 2 emails in the future as I come out with my next book and some other material. But that's only available on therlcoach.com.
Okay. I like that you're self-publishing, because I think a lot of us seasoned citizens have some knowledge, wisdom, experiences that could benefit other people. And self-publishing has opened the door for people to present those ideas to the community in a way that can help others.
Yes, I would love for it to be handled by a major publisher and all that, just for the feel good of it and all. But I recognize from what I gather, the muscle, the hustle, and all of that would be my own anyhow to get the book out there. And so this just got its speed to market so much quicker and allowed me to continue to focus and grow my business there.
Do you have any regrets? If you could roll back the clock, would you do anything differently?
I'm not a guy that's big on regrets. Yeah, I really don't know of anything. Certainly, I've made dumb decisions here and there, but I really enjoy my life. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. I'm happy with the experiences that I've had and what I've done. I've come from a culinary background originally, 15 years in food service, and then I spent 21 years in corporate America. And here I am now in the later half of my life, as I like to joke about, the second half, and trying to get this business up and going and publish at least one more book for sure. And sharing what I know and connecting people, helping people grow in their relationships, grow in their God-given skills and those things.
Are you still employed by someone else, or are you fully self-employed?
Fully self-employed
Okay.
currently.
What advice would you have for people over 50 who are trying to identify a purpose for their life or to pursue their passions?
I'm a big person that believes really doing what's in front of you is what's important. I know people have different perspectives on what callings are or what you should be doing. And from my own personal experience, most people have never encountered a burning bush. So it's a matter of what are you skilled at, what's in front of you, and what needs to be done. And that's really what's helped me with my happiness. I did have what I call my dark days at Hilton, where I got flustered at some of the things that were happening in the environment I was in. And I realized I was allowing those circumstances to control me. And I really wasn't living up to the potential that I needed to be living up to. And so I focus on that. So just doing what's in front of you, knowing that you're doing the best you can. And I just believe that the doors will open for other opportunities in doing that. And if they don't open, you'll find the other doors that need to open for you, rather than just letting life bounce you around.
And it's all about connection, right? So if you
Absolutely.
don't know what you want to do, just hang around with people, volunteer a little bit, and start connecting with others. And some door will open. You can just walk through.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that, because if we don't move forward, or we don't move, period, we'll never be able to move forward, say it
Correct.
that way. As the old saying goes, a rolling stone gathers no moss. So if you're rolling, somebody can help nudge you in that right direction, or you'll find your own direction as you roll.
That's right. How can people connect with you if they'd like to touch base?
You can certainly look up my name, Leonard Cochran, and you'll find me on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook. And then I do have a Facebook page for UpWords Unlimited. And then also, of course, you can go to UpWordsUnlimited.com. And again, that's WORDS when you type that out. And then on the rlcoach.com, again, it's THERL for relational leadership, coach.com. That's where you'll find the audiobook. So that's just a site that's parked there for that.
And if people wanted some coaching in relational leadership, that would be available through your website?
Yes, either website's got a form you can fill out and reach out to me there. And you can ping me on social media too, for that matter, quite frankly. So yes, anyway.
Super. Thank you very much for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in 2025 and beyond.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Leonard Cochran shared his inspiring journey of stepping into purpose through his work with Leah's House, a restoration home in South Haven, Mississippi, for women seeking a fresh start after experiencing either trauma or overcoming addiction. Alongside his wife, Leonard helps women rebuild their lives by providing them with stability, life skills, and a strong community to foster growth and recovery. He emphasized the importance of creating a family-like environment for these women, helping them transition from past struggles into independent, purpose-filled lives. Leonard also discussed his second venture, UpWords Unlimited, a business centered on relational leadership. Through his book and coaching, he teaches leaders how to foster genuine relationships in the workplace. These move beyond traditional management styles to create environments where employees feel valued and connected. His four foundational principles, purpose, principles, people, and profits, serve as the framework for sustainable ethical leadership in the modern workplace. Throughout our conversation, Leonard highlighted the role of faith in his work, his belief in mentorship, and the importance of forming real, meaningful connections in both personal and professional life. His story is a powerful reminder that purpose is something we can discover at any stage, especially when we utilize our skills, talent, and experiences to make a lasting impact on others. For more information about Leonard's work, you can connect with him through his websites, UpWordsUnlimited.com or therlcoach.com. His book, Relational Leadership: An Introduction, is available on Amazon and in other bookstores. And he welcomes opportunities to speak, train, and to help organizations cultivate stronger leadership principles. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. A link is also included in the show notes as well. We'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.